All right, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Markus from Village of Theresa PD, and he has 26 years total in law enforcement. And when we first connected, it was really obvious to me that wellness is something that's really at the forefront for him personally, but also as a leader and organizationally. So I'm really looking forward to having him on today's episode. Welcome to the show, Chief Markus. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Of course. No, I'm really looking forward to it. So, give us a little bit of background. You actually have a really interesting background. You used to be a Chicago cop. Your
Yep.
wife's in healthcare. So, give us a little bit of background.
Yeah. I actually started off as auxiliary in Birmingham, Michigan. Um, I was doing a volunteer thing for while I was in college, and then I started the process in the city of Chicago. I went from the small town, affluent community of Birmingham, Michigan, to Chicago. I was there for 10 years. I met my beautiful wife, who was going through residency and fellowship there through the University of Northwestern Hospital. Um, we got married, and the decision was, if you want to have kids, we're not raising them in the city. She's from Wisconsin, so we moved up to Wisconsin. I took a small suburban job in Lake Forest, Illinois. Didn't really feel the vibe there. Moved up to Cudahy. Love Cudahy. It was kind of like a smaller vibe of Chicago. It was a blue collar working community, very good police department, let you kind of do your own thing. Had a SWAT team, really enjoyed it. Then we had our first child and found out a nanny for us, myself working midnights and my wife working 70, 80 hours a week wasn't going to be very affordable compared to what my salary was. So I voluntarily stayed home with my children and became a part-time cop again. I actually joined the Wisconsin State Fair, Park Police, which was a very interesting dynamic because you're going from basically being a community police officer down to being customer service oriented. Became a lieutenant over there, ran the mounted unit, the bike unit, and the mobile response unit, which was field control. We had our fourth child. Was very busy at home. My wife's usually like, you know what? You've spent enough time at home. You're getting a little weird. Any person who stays at home for a long period of time, I think gets a little antsy, especially when they were in a high stress field like we are in law enforcement. So I went out and applied again for full time spots and came up to the village of Theresa, which I was very excited. Made a lot of big changes very quickly. And that is where I am today.
I love it. So your wife was like, "You got to go. You got to get back out there."
Yes. Being a stay-at-home dad it's a little unusual, especially it's becoming much more popular today. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but you're still the dad there. You're still not part of the group usually. Yes, there's a few other stay-at-home dads, but you're kind of isolated. It's a very isolating, kind of, I would just say, lonely position. You're staying home taking care of the kids. You're running everybody around. You don't have that many adult interaction. So yeah, it was a little lonely, and she's like, go back to work. We can afford a nanny that covers what we need to cover at home, and you can go back and pursue your career. It was a kind of a joint decision together, and she supported me, and that was very nice.
I love that. We've talked a lot about home wellness and, you know, tips and tricks for creating a long lasting relationship. And one of the things that I say all the time is it's a team, and how
Yeah.
can you support each other? And it sounds like you had your career and you said, you know what? I'm going to step up for our team right now and I'm going to take care of our kids while you work and you pursue your career. And then when it came time, she did the same thing for you and said, "Hey, we're going to be able to handle this and you go and pursue your career. And now you're chief of police." And so I love that story because I think it's really important for people to understand that when you are in a relationship and when you are in a marriage, that it is a team and you want the success for the team, and what do you have to do to get there?
And if you look at it, typically it's the female in the relationship that takes the step back. It was a little unusual that I took the step back, but I also think that shows that you can take a pause in your career and still make it to the top. Just because you pause your career doesn't mean you have to stop. You can work part time. You can raised through the ranks even part time. As long as you're still studying and learning and doing all that. The city of Chicago gave me the opportunity to get my master's degree. That was awesome. But if I was a stay-at-home parent, I could still work on a master's degree. you have time at home. So as long as you're broadening your horizons and still getting your education, I think you'll come out stronger. Actually, I find that that's actually now my strength. It was as a stay-at-home dad, because we have a lot of part-time officers. Is I have a especially unique look at. I actually go out and look for the stay-at-home parent that wants to stay in the field because one, they're usually overtrained, they're still very dedicated to the job, and they're usually highly educated. So two of my officers are actually returning stay-at-home moms, came back into law enforcement and top performers by far. One was a SWAT member where she worked with the FBI task force in Haida. The other one was a canine handler working at other communities. So to anybody else out there looking for a unique group of people, look at the stay-at-home parent.
Wow.
they're they're a great group of people. They're out there. They're starving. They're out there looking for these opportunities. And I think if you have part-time spots, these are great people to look for.
Yeah, wow. That's actually really interesting when you think about recruitment efforts, taking a look
Yeah.
at people. And I also have found that a lot of people who do leave and retire or, go pursue something else more in the public space, it seems like they do end up coming back and they're more driven and they're more
Yeah.
excited. Like sometimes having that little pause, like you said, or that little break helps to give you perspective. And, I think and I've done this before in, various ways in my career. And obviously we have a different career path, but there's been times where I'm like, man, I'm just so burnt out. Like I just need to take a step back here for a moment for whatever reason. And for me, that lasts like a day or two before I'm like, okay, I'm ready. Like I got, like I just needed like a quick little second. But there's a lot of people who retire who are like, man, I don't know if I can do this job anymore. And then once they, kind of get a taste of some of the other realities of what they're doing, they're even more excited to do the job and more grateful for the job.
And the third officer I have actually got burnt out in the job. That's my perspective of what she went through, became a mental health care worker. And I
Mm.
was back in law enforcement part time. She does the whole mental health care working thing where she does suicide intervention. I mean, that's just another great skill she's bringing to us. We're a really small department that I think bats way above its weight because of the people that we were able to bring in and all the skills that they've gone off and learned and bring back now. You see people go into finance. How many financial crimes do we have, with Bitcoin and all this other stuff? A lot of people don't understand that. But if you can get somebody who went to the finance sector who still like loves law enforcement, why not have them part time and help you out in those investigations? Those little things I think really help.
Yeah. Or even like someone who maybe can help with financial wellness, who like
Yep.
maybe now knows budgeting or knows how to invest. And so how can you leverage those skills more too?
Yes.
I think that's great.
Exactly.
Okay. So you were in one of the highest crime police departments in the country.
Yes.
And I used to live in the Chicago area, actually. And
Whereabouts?
so I lived in Rosemont when I first
Okay.
moved out there, so just right by the airport.
Yep.
And then I moved to the suburbs. So I lived in Warrenville, but I worked in Naperville, which if anyone doesn't know, they're like right close to each other. But
Yep.
I remember when I moved out there because this was my like I'm 21, I need a whole new life, and I just packed up my car and moved for a work opportunity. And my family, it was as if I was moving to a third world country. They were so afraid of me living out in Chicago. And every Monday, I'm not joking you, every Monday, my stepdad would call me and be like, well, 42 people shot in Chicago this weekend. He'd give me whatever news report he saw. And I was like, my experience wasn't that. I loved living in the Chicago area, but of course I avoided some of those areas that are known to be, really high crime. And I, stayed in areas that were, maybe a little bit more safe. But I'm familiar with the area. Obviously, I think anyone who's listening knows that Chicago is known for being one of the highest volumes and highest crime areas. And so when you were working there, what were some of the things? Because I know wellness is important to you now, and I know that it's something that's always been important to you, but we talked about the realities of the job and how this can start to impact your health and wellness, the shift work, the cumulative stress, the types of calls that you guys are getting. So can you just walk us through a little bit about how maybe the career itself started impacting you personally?
Um, I didn't notice it. It was actually family members and stuff realized it.
Mm.
You would not feel comfortable in crowds, the natural stuff. And the first time, I think my wife, now my girlfriend, actually her sister noticed it. We were at a Green Bay game. They're big time Packer fans. I was a Bears fan, still am. And a firework went off nearby us. And of course, I spun around, went for my holster, which wasn't there because we were at a football game. And she's like, "What was that reaction?" Well, it was a reaction to a loud noise, a stimulus, and which immediately my brain thought gunfire. So I spun around and did that. Um, that was just normal to me. When I moved out there, I was very naive, 100% naive. Never lived in a major city. Came from the suburbs, affluent suburbs of Detroit. Moved right downtown. I actually got a really good apartment on the Gold Coast for $435 a month. you know, I was the naive kid that was walking down the street and would say good morning to people in the middle of the city of Chicago, and people would just stare at me like, "What are you doing?" Like, we don't talk to each other like that. And Chicago's a very friendly city, but I'm coming from the suburbs. Um, Immediately got signed to the 12th district and the housing car. And yes, you go through a lot of stress and stuff like that. If you just break it down and go, hey, these are still good people. Yes, there's housing projects, and yes, there are horrible people that live there, but there are also very good people that live there. And you make those bonds between you and the people that are there that are good and are just trying to make a living, and you just try to help them out. That helped reduce the stress level a lot. Also, I played lacrosse in college. You get used to that adrenaline junkie kind of feeling. You're going after that higher intensity, so that actually helped. Um, Unbeknownst to me, I'm ADHD. I wasn't diagnosed until the last year or two because my daughter got diagnosed. So one of the things is actually you have weird sleep patterns. So I was working midnights. That actually worked really well for me. I could come home after a shift and go right to bed, wake up, have normal rest hours. It was great. It was also very different for me where some of my friends were married and had families and they had to deal with all that stress. I wasn't. I was single. I had no families. I had no responsibilities. So I could go home and sleep for 10 hours. I didn't have to have that stress of waking up, making sure kids got to go to school and stuff like that. So I was very beneficial like that. And then I overcompensated for my ADHD by drinking way too much caffeine and self-medicating through that way. So that ended up working out. But then I really got into working out and working out. And it all came through, we worked, as I was working, I got really good shape after the academy, came out. I was running a lot. I was in good shape. You work a few years, you're eating good food, you get a little lazy. You start focusing on your health. And I went to a specialized unit. It was a mobile strike force. And the supervisor there was a former general in the Marine Corps Reserve, I believe. And he allowed us to work out for the first hour on our job. So we worked 10-hour shifts. And the first hour, there was a gym provided for us. It wasn't great. It wasn't like, 5 stars. It was used equipment and stuff. There was a track inside. And we were allowed to work out for an hour a day. And that was amazing. We started getting healthier. You start looking at different programs. I really got into Beachbody, the Insanity program. I lost a ton of weight, kept it off for years. And you start realizing that, you get into a foot chase, you're 30 something, you're in full gear and you're out running an 18-year-old. And you can joke with the kid as you're chasing them. Like, I'm an old dude catching you. And it's, you start to see the health benefits there. Your sleep patterns progressively get better and better and better. So the fitness really became a focus for me at that point.
Yeah. Okay. I want to kind of I want to backtrack a little bit. I want to ask you a couple questions. So when you were at that football game and the firework went off and you spin around and you have this reaction of like shots fired and someone calls you out on it, was that a wake up moment for you, or were you just like, it's okay? Like, did you brush it off, or were you like, oh yeah, like maybe I am starting to, kind of, respond in ways that aren't, quote unquote normal?
No, I took it as I brushed it off because I didn't want to worry people that were there.
Sure.
But I did take it as a wake up call. But I also took it as, okay, if you're not on that edge and you're in the city of Chicago and something bad happens, then what happens? I was involved in a shooting in the city of Chicago, and I saw very different reactions between, I want to say about 8 officers were there, including one person totally overloaded, mentally, physically couldn't cope with it, to people going after the wrong suspects, to my partner and I reacting, and I think in a very proper and efficient manner. So yes, I took it as like, ooh, this is something I need to look at, but also this is also something that you need, almost like you need to have that reaction, you need to have that understanding, but then having to the ability to shut it off when it needs to be shut off. So you don't overreact in the wrong situation where somebody comes up and like taps you on the shoulder and you turn around and you sock them or something like that. I have seen that happen with other people. Um, or you take a fight too far in your home life. You come in a domestic violence situation because you are overreacting. You're on a fight or flight at all times. Your body gets used to that. So I think that's when I started looking more into exercise and being able to burn off some of that energy, refocus your brain, and realize, hey, you also need to take time for yourself. That's when I really got into walking the lakeshore in Chicago, making sure I got out on a summer day and just hung out in the sun. Just taking those calming moments with nature and taking care of yourself that way too, like physically, mentally, and being able to shut off the fire flight. And then when you got to work, you had to turn it back on, just to be safe.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you said that because it makes total sense that when you're at work, that is something that keeps you safe. But also, I would guess that that would just keep you safe in general. But having the ability to kind of understand the environment, and that's hard, and I think there are a lot of strategies on, how can you, kind of enter into work mode and how can you enter into home mode. But I've asked this question a lot, and I would say the vast majority of people that I talk to say that you can never really completely turn it off. It's work is always going to come home to a certain extent, and home will go to work from a certain extent because you guys are human, and I think that you are trained in a certain way, but also you have an incredibly unique career that puts you in a different category. And I think that it's unrealistic to think that you're going to be able to completely shut it off one way or another. And so I think that was a really good point. And I appreciate you talking about some of those mechanisms that helped you in a healthy way to be able to
Yeah.
offload some of those things and kind of self-regulate and make sure that you had the things to keep you successful. And I know when we talked offline, you started really focusing on this within your organization to make sure that your team has the tools to be able to be healthier and to be more fit. When did wellness organizationally, I guess, maybe as a chief or as a leader, when did that become a focus and why? And what were some of the things that you started implementing?
Um, Basically, when I became a chief, I saw it a little bit as a lieutenant, especially with the unrest or whatever we'll call them here in Southeast Wisconsin. Um, Even as a part-time police officer, we actually had a unit that would go to all the unrests. So we were in Kenosha, we were in Milwaukee, we were in Tosa. We were actually right down the street from Carl Rittenhouse, that whole situation down there. And you'd see guys come in and they're like, hey, I'm on this diet or this diet. I need to have this with me, this with me. And you're like, okay, that's not very practical. Like, congratulations, you're doing the keto diet or you're doing carnivore. That's great. But realize we're going to be stuck down here for 15 hours. I can't guarantee you're going to get only protein. I can't guarantee you this. Your blood sugars have to be at a certain level. So I started noticing it there and implementing, like, hey guys, I appreciate you're on these diets. I really think that's important for you. You lose your weight, stay healthy, keep you motivated. But this next week you can't do it. I'm sorry. Like, you got to have your Cliff Bars. You're going to have this just to keep yourself energized and stuff like that. So I kind of started realizing that then. When I took over my department, I'd fallen back into bad habits, especially trying to take a department that was quite backwards. Old equipment falling apart. Literally, we had a gas tank fall over the bottom of our squad car. It was sold and rusted. Radios that weren't compatible anymore. So we're trying to do everything at once. You know, Again, I was up to 4 or 5 energy drinks a day. My officer at the time was a little overweight. Um, Not to shame anybody, but it's like, you can realize this, like, hey, like, you got to get into a foot chase. If you do this stuff, are you good enough shape? And then be in a rural area. Now I'm going for a major city where backup is instantaneous. I'm driving around with a partner to now I'm by myself and backup can be 15, 20 minutes away, worst case scenario, the Dodge County is busy. It could be 30 minutes, before somebody shows up to help you. So now you need to be in physically shape to chase somebody, but get into a fight with them and handcuff them all by yourself and be prepared to do it yourself.
Yeah.
So that's when I was like, ooh, I got to really look at this in a totally different way. Um, we went through personnel changes and a lot of stuff like that, but that's when I started implementing everything. We actually took the kitchen table out of the kitchen and threw it in the front office. Like, hey, we don't really use this. We're not using the kitchen table because we don't actually sit down and eat most of the time. And if we do, it's by ourselves. You can do it at a desk. You can do it at this. The first thing I put in was a workout bench with bar, had legs, arms, chests, everything you can do right there. I just went out and bought it myself. Didn't waste the department's money on it because we don't have that huge of a budget. And I'm like, I can do this on Amazon for myself. We put it in there. Everybody can use it for 45 minutes a day. I don't care if your shift's 6 hours, 8 hours, 10, 12. Everybody can use it for 45 minutes a day as long as calls are, you're not dodging calls to do it. And you have 45 minutes, do whatever you need, don't do max reps. And this is a voluntary program. So I'm not ordering you. So if you do get hurt, it's not a duty on injury. For those other supervisors are like, I hear that a lot is from chiefs is like, well, is it an injury on duty? No, it's voluntary. They don't have to do this. It's not a requirement. We spoke to our attorney about that too. So the next thing we actually brought in was one of my officers was cleaning out her basement. She had a treadmill. So we brought the treadmill in. We brought a punching bag in. Started doing a lot more research on, I'm getting myself a little bit older. I'm 45 now. What do I need to actually do to keep up my muscle mass, my health? So I found a company that's here in Wisconsin, Pure Choice, I think it's called. They do protein. It's very clean protein. You're reading a lot right now that's heavy metals in protein they're finding. This is a local business. It's a local company. So I actually started buying protein just for the officers to use. It's your choice. You don't have to check with your doctor, all that kind of fun stuff. But it's there. It's there for you to need. I have 3 female officers, 2 male officers. And, even as females get older, every research is showing you need more protein. You need more protein to stay healthy, to create that muscle mass. And then the next thing that I added to the shelf was creatine. And, first it was just to help the muscle gain. Like, hey, we all want to get muscle gain. But now if you look at the research right now, it's cognitive ability, mood, everything. You're doing sleep disorder. I think I'm one of the rare people who prefers midnights, especially when I was single and had no responsibilities. Now it's much harder as a dad and as a partner in a relationship. It's very much more difficult to do midnights. But if we have people doing midnights, usually it's still me. I volunteer to do those. Just adding that extra creatine in there, I can notice a difference. I'm more focused. I'm more on point. The fatigue isn't there as much. You just boost the level amount. I normally do 5 grams a day. Now I maybe bump it up to 10 or 15 if I know I'm going to do that. So adding those supplements there, and it's like, hey, again, this is nothing you're required to do. They're there if you want it. Hey, by the way, here's a cool research study. I'll email it out or I'll just leave it on the desk. Like, hey, guys, read it. And girls, take the time, educate yourself, see if this is for you. It may not be for you. If you have a dairy allergy or something like that. So if there's something else you guys want, I always communicate, like, if there's something else you want at the station, just let me know. And I'm buying these myself, I'm not taking budgetary money, because they're cheap, especially a tub of creatine that lasts us 90 days cost me $15. Yeah. Just to stay at the station. This is all leading to better health. They're stronger, they're healthier, they're happier. This is a little something that I can go, hey, this is from me, the chief, to you. What else do you guys, what else do you guys want? And let me know, and we'll look into it and we'll research it together. And, I have one officer that's doing the Okinawa diet. That's what she's really into right now. It's kind of a take on the Mediterranean diet. I have another gentleman. He just lost a lot of weight. He's in great shape now. He's a former baseball player, like an athlete in college. He's more on the creatine and protein, and he doesn't use my protein and creatine unless he forgets his for the day. So it's like, a little extra something there. I have another officer who just likes to run. That's her thing, and she's now looking at the creatine and stuff like that. So it's just encouraging it to research their own health and understand their own health and how they can better themselves through supplements, through just exercise. So, and I think they're reducing their stress levels, Especially I come in and like, hey, we're not doing this well, you're upset with me. Fine, go hit the punching bag. Go hit the weights. I'm going to piss you off. Another supervisor is going to piss you off. But here's your outlet for that. You had a bad call, come in. Like you get a real stressful call, come in, work out. You'll find out that you'll de-stress. So the next time you go out, you're not taking that anger or aggression out on the next stop or the next person, but you can take it out on the weight system. You can take it out on that punching bag and hopefully have better outcomes and healthier officers that, down the line. My goal is, so getting a little off topic right now. We have an old station. It's a 1910 bank, and it's really cool. It has the old vault. It has the old tin ceiling in it. So I called up the university because we can't afford our blueprints for this place. Like our community can't. So I called up the university, the architectural school, and for a huge cost savings, they sent out a grad student. As part of the grad student project, they came in and redesigned our station for us. We're going through that redesign right now with a great idea of remodeling it. Now I want to do that for health. I think we focus a lot on mental health, and my wife was a college athlete. She played soccer. She blew out her ankle. She's got a couple pins in her ankle. My health and how I should lift is completely different than how a woman should lift. And I would like to see more research done on, but focused on law enforcement. We do a lot of, push-ups, sit-ups. Okay, that's great, but how does that actually functionally transition to law enforcement careers? Illinois has a power test. It's push-ups, sit-ups, sit and reach, and a mile run race, or mile and a half run. It's also based on gender and age, which I don't think is appropriate because we all do the same job at the end of the day. You look at Tennessee, where they do jumping fences. They have to do a dummy drag. I think that's more realistic. And I would love to see exercises that, an officer could do, no matter if they're in a small rural area, then their chief gives them 45 minutes, or they're in a busy city and they can come out and do stretches and minor exercises for 5 to 10 minutes in between calls to reduce stress and also build those core strengths so we don't have the back problems. We don't have the hip problems, and that, an officer that is female who may have different biological needs for strengthening knees or ankles versus a male who needs to do lower back or something like that. I'm not an expert. So I'm not, these are just areas that I think could be researched a lot better. And I would love to have grad students come out, look at us and say, hey, this is what you need to do. This is what you're doing day to day. Something simple like when I was in Chicago, the range instructors were always like, if you can do 30 push-ups straight with your own body weight, you'll be a better shot. And we're all kind of like, okay, whatever. We all became better shots after we could do 30 push-ups straight, and it's those little things that translate to actual work that I think I would love to see put out there. And if we could be part of the catalyst of that, I would love to have that. So.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. And I would also look into Ohio. There
Yeah.
are a few agencies in Ohio that are doing something very similar to what you said before, where they took a look and they said, and I've had a couple of them on the podcast, where they took a look and said, okay, when are you ever going to run a mile and a half, like on the job, right? They're like,
Yeah.
probably not that often, but we sure like sprint a lot,
Yeah.
And so they started kind of taking a look, okay, what are the key functions of the career? And then what are the things that we can implement in ongoing testing or, you know, athletic standards that they're trying
Yeah.
to set within the organization. And I think that it was like they had a sprint. I think they had jumping over a wall. They had dragging, and I don't remember if it was a dummy or if it was tires or something, but they had
Yeah.
like basically pushing, pulling, sprinting, jumping kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a great idea. I also think that what you said before, the micro actions, and I try to tell people all the time, because I think, of course, if you have the time to do a 45-minute workout, or if your agency is supportive of you doing a 45-minute workout every day, or 5 days a week or 3 days a week, that's great. But I think a lot of people get really overwhelmed by like time, especially
Yes.
if you don't have the time to do it on shift. The idea of having to go and do a 30-minute to an hour workout at an outside gym on top of work, on top of family, and people think
Yep.
that it's all or nothing. And I always tell everybody, something is better than nothing. How can we integrate, I think, micro actions on shift is really
Yep.
smart. Can you create habits of this that maybe, and you guys are a small agency, so I'm guessing that you don't have like consistent briefings, but maybe it's like, hey, like when you get to the department, I want you to do XYZ as like a quick warm up before you hit the streets. And then when you come back, we want you to do XYZ for 2 minutes, so it's something really small and easy, but something that can compound over time. And then I tell people, there are things that you can do on your own as well. And I like to use this example because I think it's so simple and it's something that everyone can do. When we think about stress, a lot of times what happens is we start to allow that negativity to kind of seep into our lives, right? So you start to see more of the complaining, more of the negative feedback or conversations. And so what happens is our brain is trained to start to look for those things. I actually saw this thing recently, and this is same subject, but they said, whatever you look for, you are going to find evidence of that. So
Yep.
if you are looking for negative things, you're going to find evidence of negative things. And if you're looking for positive things, the same thing is true. And so I tell people, do habit stacking. Like when you pick one activity, when you're in the shower, when you're brushing your teeth, when you're driving to work, everyone drives to work, whether it's, a 2-minute commute or a 2-hour commute. And then choose one thing that you can do that's going to help to offload that stress. So maybe it's a breathing technique, maybe it's a mindfulness, activity or meditation. Maybe it's gratitude. That's my favorite. Just wake up every day when you're in the shower, when you're brushing your teeth, say 3 things that you're grateful for and start to train your brain to be more positive. And to your point, when you said you want people to be happier and healthier, okay, well now if we tackle that first part and people are happier because now when they go to work, they're thinking about the things they're grateful for instead of like the things that suck in their life.
Yep.
Now they show up and they're a little bit happier. And then how can you incorporate those small actions that can make you maybe a little bit healthier? And I have never heard any chief say that they started providing supplements. So I think that that is really cool. And anyone who's listening, it's a really unique idea, and especially your ability to self fund those things. But I also thought it was really interesting that you're like, we tossed out the kitchen table because we don't use it. And there are a lot of chiefs out there, and I'm sure that there are a lot of leadership who are listening right now that are in the same position, that are in small agencies, old buildings, don't have the space. And so for you to get creative and say, we're tossing that out, we're going to use the space that we already have more effectively and creatively. I've had other agencies who have also tossed some stuff out, like on a back patio or, whatever you got to do to get it done. And so I thought that that was really cool. The micro actions and then utilizing your space more creatively and effectively.
I also think like little things like that can help, but also I bought a little ninja juicer thing. If you go to all these police stations, you always see the stereotypical, the pizza oven. What's that say to you? Well, buy a frozen pizza, throw it in there, and that's what you're gonna have for dinner. You have a microwave, blah blah blah. I've been trying to add the extra stuff for the healthier options. So like, having a juicer there, having the little Ninja mixing balls. So if you want to bring your protein shake in and throw in some frozen berries, that's the next thing. I haven't told my wife yet. So I plan on going to Costco, buying the frozen berries and just leaving them in there for anybody who wants to take those, throw them in there and make your little juice drinks and stuff like that, just to keep everybody healthier. And I think even if you're a person who's like, I don't really care about this, or health is not on my radar. If your people are healthier, they'll take less sick days. If they're taking less sick days, they're more productive.
Mm-hmm.
If they're more energetic, if they have more energy, they're more productive. So if you just look at it from a productive standpoint and less sick days, that will help your bottom line. You're not paying extra overtime for covering those shifts. So if that's your motivation, just look at it at that point. Like what you're going to invest, the little money you're going to invest in creatine or in protein is going to have much more higher beneficial outcomes in healthier and happier officers. You'll have less, if they're stronger and they're more physically fit, you'll have probably less IODs, injury on duties. You'll probably have less, just injuries in general. So you'll keep the people on there healthier and happier. And I think if your outcome is, hey, I'm about this about health. I've had I had my own personal scare, way overdoing on caffeine, way overdoing on stress. That was an expensive trip to the hospital for myself. If
Yeah.
you just look at it that way, if you're a person who's all about the bottom line, you invest in these little things, it will make huge difference in your bottom line. You'll have healthier officers, you'll have healthier employees, and you'll see productivity increase. Just as we're a big proponent of technology, we're moving into AI, and we're seeing productivity increase through artificial intelligence, and 30% less time writing reports, et cetera, et cetera. You allow them to work out for 45 minutes a day, you will see much better production. Their stress levels will go down. You'll see less complaints. I'm like, if anybody bothered to track this, somebody gets a chance to work out in the middle of the day. Right after their workout, their complaint levels will go down because they'll be friendlier. They'll have more patience. They'll have clearer thoughts. I think it will reduce everything hugely if we allow our officers to, one, work out, two, be healthier, and three, be happier, because they will have the patience to understand what people are going through instead of snapping and going full bore every time. It's not going to eliminate it, but I think you will see the reduction in both sick days, injuries, and complaints.
Yeah. Well, endorphins make you happy.
Yes, yes, they do.
Proven.
Yeah.
But even, if we look at it, and you mentioned this earlier, and I wanted to kind of circle back to it, but if you take the example that you said, you started focusing on your health, and now you're able to outrun 18-year-olds and you're cracking jokes and you're like, come on, man, like I'm 35 and I'm passing you up, and you
Yes.
have the stamina and the ability to do that. What is the opposite? If you have someone who doesn't have the ability to do that, now it's a safety issue. Because if you can't overcome the subject and they can overcome you, now it's a safety issue. And so if we look at it from both perspectives, yes, retention, you want to keep your people happier, healthier. You want to put in place resources and tools that are going to help proactively to create more prevention in sick time and all the things, injuries. But then if we also look at it from a safety perspective, you guys have to be able to do your job out on the streets, and you have to be able to do it effectively. And if you aren't able to detain, you're not able to run, you're not able to do these things, and they are overcoming you, then that's a really big issue, right? So it's to me, wellness is a safety mechanism. How can we
Yes.
keep everyone safe as well? And so, yeah, I'm right there with you. And my final question is,
Yes.
your words of wisdom for the younger generation. And what I'm seeing a lot of is for the younger men and women, maybe feeling like they're bulletproof and feeling like it's only us old people that need to focus on wellness. And so for the younger men and women who are entering into the career, what words of wisdom would you share with them from a wellness perspective? Maybe something that you wish you would have known, or something that's helped you along the way that could help them.
I would say stay focused on your physical fitness, your mental fitness, all of that. But for me, I wish I would have focused more on my physical fitness. I think mentally, I was always pretty good. I left the academy and I was probably in one of the better shapes of my life. I came out of college, playing lacrosse. You start to slow down, you start to have fun, you start to have, especially in a big city, you go out and you have fun. I wish I would have focused more on my physical health my whole life. Um, you will get injured no matter what through this career. I've had partners break fingers, blow out knees, just on foot chases and stuff like that. If you're physically fit and you're healthy, those injuries will always be less. Even if you do destroy that knee, if you look at, the top performers, like Navy SEALs, they actually recover from a knee blowout faster than a professional athlete because they're even in better shape. They have that resource, that backup. So the more physically fit you are, even if you do get hurt, Even if this is the worst possible thing, like you get shot, you will always do better physically if you stay physically fit throughout your career. You will be better off long term into your retirement. You won't have all the joint issues. You look at some of the guys, talk to the retirees. They walk like they're German shepherds. They've had all that weight on their hips. They never took care of their bodies. They have bad back, hip, and knee issues. And I just hope everybody can get through this career physically fit and actually retire without those chronic problems. So I would just say, keep an eye on your fitness, always focus on it, always make it a point of your life, and just make it through a career happy and healthy.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you.
much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing your words of wisdom.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course.